What does the inner work in the context of your marriage look like? What does it entail, and how do you know if you're actually doing it? There's 5 categories that we can put pretty much all of our work in our marriage, in our personal development under these categories. The first is self-awareness and emotional regulation. So the definition of this is to be able to cultivate the ability to recognize and manage your own emotions. So it's the ability to know your emotions, to be able to name them, recognize them, even just if to yourself, even if you're not ready to share that, but that you yourself know how you're feeling, what's happening, and that you're tuned into yourself enough to know that, right? And even if you are not aware of what you would call the emotion, but you know that you're feeling something, you know that you're dysregulated, you know that you're activated or triggered. That's kind of the first piece of understanding something is getting kicked up that is going to cause me to act out on my emotions, and that's going to sabotage my intentions. So that's why emotional regulation is so important. The impact of having strong emotional regulation skills is that you can enhance your communication, you can reduce your reactive behaviors, you're much more in control of what you say and what you do intentionally, consciously, so that what you choose to say or do is supportive of what your ultimate goals are, and you don't accidentally shoot yourself in the foot. When we cannot regulate our emotions, we are not able to do that. Our emotions will hijack, because it's our amygdala in the back of our brain. It will hijack everything we know in our prefrontal cortex, and it will always win, right? Because it's so much stronger. So John Gottman talks about this in his research too. He talks about the importance of emotional regulation to de-escalate conflicts so that you don't go to, from 0 to 90. Like a lot of couples, especially high conflict couples, will say it just happens so fast. An emotion gets activated, something is said, that triggers the other person, something is said, and now it's guns a-blazing, and it happens before you even are aware of it. And maybe this has happened before where you're having a discussion, it's starting to get escalated, and you realize like, oh my gosh, how did we get here, right? That's the power of emotional dysregulation to take you out. So you want to be able to soothe your nervous system. So how do we do this? Self-awareness and emotional regulation are going to require the capacity to soothe your nervous system. And a lot of this is physiological. So breathing exercises are a great way to do this. I love the Wim Hof breathing method, but really any kind of guided meditation, breathing work, yoga. Some people run, some people tap. I think tapping is a powerful way to break through a really overwhelming emotion, anger, panic, anxiety, or even cravings if you're managing an addiction. Tapping, it's called EFT, but not EFT like emotional focus therapy, like Sue Johnson's method, but EFT as in emotional freedom technique, which is the tapping. And you can look that up on YouTube if you just type in EFT tapping for whatever it is. And there's a ton of instructional videos out there. It's actually a very easy thing to practice. And that's something that helps a lot of people. Journaling and also vagus nerve exercises are a great way to instill the skills of emotional regulation. There's also, I need to look up her name, but she wrote a book called The Work, and she has a lot of really great actionable tools in that book. The Holistic Psychologist is her name. Nicole LePera, that's what it is. She has a lot of teachings on how the vagus nerve works and how it can regulate us and it can dysregulate us. And so a lot of that is going to be physiological. If we're already dysregulated, it's pretty much impossible just to think your way out of it in that moment. You have to know how to soothe yourself. Sometimes just going into another room, writing down your feelings, whatever it takes to stop. The first step is to be aware that you're triggered, to stop, to make sure that you are not acting on it in an old way. Doing nothing is a win, right? When you know that you're dysregulated and you don't act, you don't speak, you don't say another word, you're already winning, right? Because you're not reinforcing that groove that we get in when we have the stimulus response, the trigger, the response, or the reaction. The longer you can pause that initial trigger from the reaction, the stronger you're going to get at emotional regulation. And in the beginning, it feels like Herculean effort. It feels impossible. But it really only takes a few times of practice and having it be successful, where it's like, wow, that really worked, and now I know I can do it again. So that's the first piece of doing the work when we're talking about breaking patterns in a relationship that is struggling. The other piece of doing the work is identifying and reframing core beliefs. Everything that we do, the emotions that we have and the behaviors that we engage in, the energy that we bring, it all comes from our underlying core beliefs, whether we're aware of them or not, because they're unconscious a lot of the times. A clue into our unconscious beliefs is like, what are my automatic thoughts? What is my interpretation? What meaning did I make out of that? That will give us a clue as to what our limiting beliefs are. So we have to be able to uncover those deep-seated beliefs that are usually formed in childhood in the first 7 years of life. And then we have to be able to rewrite those. So part of doing the work is realizing, you know what? I made an assumption. I had an automatic negative belief that like my partner doesn't care about me because there was an oversight and I felt disappointed, but my brain turns that into rejection. That's a limiting belief somewhere in my mind that I can recondition. Once I've reconditioned that, well, then I can feel disappointment and I can talk about that. But I'm not being guided by these programs that I never even chose. Right? That's the power of rewiring these narratives and supporting. It's sort of like that battle that you get in between, I know what I'm supposed to do, but I'm not doing it, and I'm in a battle with myself. That goes away when you can recondition those negative beliefs. But you have to know that that's actually happening, and you have to be willing to look at that. And the first step, I think, is understanding that our unconscious mind informs so much more than we think it does. It is very humbling as a human being to realize how much of life is conditioned. And so doing the work is acknowledging that. It starts with that premise and realizing that what feels really true because it's so automatic doesn't make it more true than anything else that I could choose to believe. And that's really important in taking your power back. It is a game changer because, like I've said before, it doesn't matter how many tools you have in your arsenal. If your core beliefs don't support it, they will sabotage you and you won't even remember to use those tools. Now, the third thing is the ability to heal past resentments. Doing the work is the willingness to come forward with your resentments, to know what you need to feel better. What would it actually take? So many people are like, I'm mad, I'm frustrated, I'm disconnected, and I don't even want to be around that person. Okay, what would you need to feel better? What would it take to clear the hurts and the resentments of the past? I don't know. That's the inner work, is to know what that is. It's your job to know what that is. Now, a good coach or a therapist can ask questions to help you identify what could help you feel better. But until you know that, you're not going to be able to come forward and get what you need to repair. So that's the first piece of doing the work to clear past resentments, is knowing, what that is in you. And then the second piece is that if you are the person who has hurt your partner and they have resentments against you, doing the inner work means being willing to hear the hurt, to hold space to hear how you have impacted them. Even if you disagree with their beliefs, even if you disagree with the premise of their emotions, it's holding space for their hurt, understanding the impact that you had on them because of who they are, and being their ally in being able to listen without defensiveness, to express an explicit willingness to join them in rebuilding trust, in making them feel better. I want to be on your side. I think that when we don't do the inner work, we either just expect them to get over it on their own, or we just make them wrong and think, well, that's all on them and we're not their ally. Or if we haven't done the inner work to really look at what we need and leave our comfort zones to ask for what we need in order to clear those resentments, we're just not going to be able to build trust. We're not going to be able to clear the air. It's never going to leave your dynamic. It's always going to be informing your dynamic. It's like your present moment and your future is literally being written by the past that you don't even want, that already happened, and it's still informing you if you can't clear resentment. So I think that's a really overlooked part of doing the inner work a lot of times. One thing you can look into is Terry Real's relational life therapy. He talks about full respect living, and a really big part of full respect living is advocating for and looking at repair as respect, right? Like, it's a sign of respect to initiate the resolution of past grievances, to be able to say, I know that there's this thing between us, and I know that it's blocking the love and the connection, and I'm going to do the inner work and this inner exploration of what my blocks are and do everything that I can to join with you to clear that out. So don't overlook that piece of it. It isn't just a symptom. I mean, it is sort of in the beginning, but unless you do the work to clear that out, it will become the cause of other issues down the line. Ongoing emotional disconnection, ongoing conflict, and having that distorted ratio of 5 to 1 to the point where you're not on stable footing. Now, the fourth thing you have to do with inner work is inner child work. So this is usually what people think of when they think of inner work, is inner child work. This is a big part of it. It's just not the only part of it. And what does that mean? That means being able to tune into the wounding from childhood that you might not have been aware of or able to process at that time that is getting activated in the relationship, especially when you know that your reaction is disproportionate to what's happening in the present moment, or if it feels very profoundly familiar, like, oh, I used to always feel this way growing up. Now you're making me feel this way too, right? And then you're even more mad at them because they know you and they know your history. But sometimes they're just making a decision that you don't like and they're not actually doing anything wrong. And so when you know that your reaction is disproportionate, there's usually some kind of childhood wounding. And if you can't tune into yourself and what was hurt in you and hold space for your hurt self, it's going to be really difficult for you to do that for somebody else. And I see this a lot with anyone who's ever been socialized to be disconnected from their emotions because it's considered weak, have a really hard time being there in that same way for other people. And I can't remember who said it this way, but it's like, you can't meet somebody where you can't meet yourself. So it's actually doing that inner child work might seem like, well, what does that get me in terms of the relationship? Well, what it gets you is it allows you to heal and take care of and nurture and understand and hold space for and give compassion for parts of you that no one ever did for you before. Or maybe your partner tried, but it's never going to work. It's going to be a black hole until you heal yourself, right? Until you have healed that inner child, they can never correct what went wrong in childhood. So doing that inner work will help you be a better partner for your spouse, but also it will make it easier for you to receive things that you might not even want to receive because it wasn't something that your inner child could feel comfortable with, right? And this ties back into the limiting core beliefs. If it's not familiar to you as a young child to feel truly cherished and valued and adored, it's going to be something that you might not be able to receive in an adult relationship. And so then you sort of act that out in your relationship so that you can prove to them, see, I knew it. I knew it wasn't going to matter, right? I knew you weren't going to be thinking about me. That's how this inner child work is so deeply connected to those programs and the limiting belief wiring. But in terms of what this particular thing looks like, it's not the same thing as changing those beliefs at the subconscious level. This is about reparenting yourself. This is about when you feel that that part of you is alive and is guiding the show, it's loving them, not getting mad at them. So Terry Real uses this analogy of, you don't take the inner child and throw them out the window when they're acting up and trying to take your steering wheel. You put them in the back seat and you fasten their seatbelt and you grab the steering wheel and you take charge. And you reassure them and you say, I've got this. I know where we're going. We're okay. You're safe. And I'm not going to let you derail us. And so there's like this loving sort of strong guidance where your functional adult starts to become stronger than the adaptive child or the wounded child who is now acting out or trying to scream and get its needs met. And that's where you have to start, instead of rejecting that part of you or bypassing that part of you, is actually loving that part of you, having compassion for that side of you. That is a lot easier said than done. A lot of people recognize that intellectually, but then as soon as it's activated, they're mad at themselves. Like, why am I letting this happen again? I can't believe I'm reacting this way, or I shouldn't be feeling this way. This is so dumb. So that's an example of doing the inner work, is recognizing, no, this is coming from somewhere and I need to honor that and I need to love this part of me so that it doesn't take over. And so like it's this relationship with yourself that you're cultivating between the different parts of you. Now, there's a lot on inner child work that you can find on YouTube. There's a lot of inner child work that you can find on Google. A lot of it is, you can write a letter to your younger self. You can write a letter to the grownups that took care of you as a child that you felt hurt by and not give it to them, but be able to give voice to that child. And then you can write a letter back to them as what you wish you would have heard. What would be the response that this part of me needed? I'm going to give it to them now. You literally reparent yourself. It's a corrective emotional experience that allows you also to support your partner in doing that too. And then finally, the last thing I want to say about doing the inner work is differentiation of self. So this is the ability to maintain your own identity while remaining emotionally connected to somebody else. That's a delicate balance, right? Sometimes people feel like they're going to get engulfed, and so they wall off because they didn't have good boundaries modeled to them, and they're going to lose themselves. So the only way they can maintain autonomy is to avoid and wall off and like protect themselves so much that there's no connection. So they have their individuality and their autonomy, but they've had to pay a price. They don't get to keep connection as a result. Or on the flip side, you're so connected and you're always choosing that connection to the point where you're abandoning yourself or you're boundaryless and you will accept things that are actually dishonoring of who you are and what your life dreams are and what your values are. And so it's like you don't know how, like, how do I stay connected? Now I'm sacrificing my sense of self for connection. Finding that balance is difficult, I think, in this world for most everybody, but the level of difficulty, of course, ranges depending on what your experiences have been, what the template is of your relational life that we get in early childhood. But being able to really have that sense of self, who am I? That goes back to the vision that I talk about. What am I here for? What are my values? What is my purpose? What do I want to be able to say I did in this lifetime on my last day on earth? What will I regret if I didn't do? What will I regret if I did? And that guides you. Because sometimes people, and I had this in my 20s, I don't know who I am. When people say just be yourself, well, who is that? I don't know who that is. How you find out is you think about, what do I want? What do I think is important in life? What kind of people do I gravitate towards and why? And so then how do I show up to create that? And then you become that, right? But you're being guided by a sense of I that is separate from others, but is not too egotistical. Because if you're too much in the ego of I, then that will also compromise your spiritual growth as well. So this is actually very nuanced, delicate work. And it's like something that never really ends. I think it's always a balancing act, just like we have this balancing act in society between what I want as an individual and also what I have to consider. I want to run this red light because I have to be somewhere. But if I do that, I could hurt somebody else. So I have to consider the collective in all of my decision making. It's really just like that on a micro level in relationships. And then you can prevent enmeshment. You can know who you are and come from a very grounded place that's actually very magnetic. When you come from a place of like, I know who I am, I know what I'm here for, I know what I'm not going to participate in. It's not that hard to say no to somebody, or it's not that hard to pivot or to withdraw from a dynamic that is toxic. It's much easier to disconnect when you're coming from a place of self-differentiation because your sense of well-being is not hinged on the other person. So again, I'm talking about the what, and there's a lot more like, well, how do we do that I can't get into for the purposes of this talk today. But if you start with your relationship vision, what's important to me and why, what must I have? And your relationship vision then can be turned into a description of what's important to me then becomes who I have to be in order to live that truth. So I hope that makes sense, you guys. That's really all I have today. I want to open it up for questions. That's it for today. If you like my content, please take a second and either like this video or subscribe to my channel, or both. That will help us reach the people that really need to hear this stuff.